Kaya could mend anything with string, fish nets, kite tails, even the torn hems of arguments. Aunt Malia said she'd been born with a spool in her hand and a knot in her hair. On the afternoon the sky ripped. Kaya was mending a kite with coral pink thread while the trade winds wandered across the roofs of Moana Loop, their crescent of houses on the island of Hanu'u. The rip was not loud. It was the sound of wet paper tugged in two, followed by a soft hiss like a tired wave in the throat of a shell. Kaya glanced up. For a heartbeat the world wore a new scar, a long seam of blue-white light above the palms. And then something small fell through it, dragging sparks, skipping once off the lagoon, and skidding into the ironwoods beyond the beach. "Did you hear that?" Aunt Malia called from the kitchen window, elbow deep in flour and authority. "Probably a gull with big feelings," Kaya called back, already sliding her feet into rubber slippers. "I'll check the traps." "You'll check the traps, and then you'll check back in," Aunt Malia said, which was how she said "I love you" when her hands were full. Kaya jogged across the hot sand, her best friend Kai, whose laugh sounded like a ukulele learning to be a drum, trotting to catch up. "You saw it too," Kai said, breathless. "Meteor, or a broken drone, or a god late for something." They passed the crab traps and kept going, into ironwood shade where the roots curled like sleeping ankles. The air smelled of pine and ocean and surprise. In a shallow crater the size of a canoe lay a metal sphere scorched black, the color of a secret that had gone through something. It whirred, coughed, and opened like a seed pod. Inside, a creature shaped like the idea of a puppy drawn by a comet. It had sea glass eyes and fur like wet midnight, with flecks of sapphire that shifted as it breathed. 6 short limbs tucked close under a barrel body, 2 ears that could have been shells, a mouth too wide for the manners of Earth, and a stubby tail that kept deciding to be a propeller. Kaya whispered, "Don't touch it." "Obviously," he said, touching it. The creature sneezed a spray of glitter that smelled like rain on hot stone. Then it looked at Kaya and made a sound that was almost a greeting and almost a question. It blinked memorably. Kaya's chest did the strange, soft ache that meant, "I have already decided." "Hey," she said softly, "I'm Kaya." "You landed crooked." It mimicked, "Ki-ah," tasting the vowels like fruit. Then it reached up with 2 of its 6 little paws and grabbed the hem of her t-shirt with the calm competence of something that had already chosen a person. Kai crouched, eyes huge. "It's adorable. And probably illegal. Also bitey?" The creature yawned, revealing a mouthful of marshmallow teeth and one improbable molar shaped like a hexagon. "Not bitey," it said firmly, and then hiccuped blue sparks. An alarm chimed from the sphere, 3 urgent tones that made the ironwoods lean in. The sphere flickered, projected a brief waterfall of symbols into the air that meant nothing to the island and everything to someone far away, and died with a last embarrassed blink. Kaya scooped the creature up on instinct. It weighed honest, not heavy, but not pretend. It smelled faintly of clean thunder. "Okay," she said. "New plan. We mend the sky later. For now, we hide the baby?" "Pet asteroid," Kai offered. The creature burbled. "Kip," it said decisively, tapping its own chest with a paw. "Your name is Kip?" Kaya asked. "Kip," it agreed, proud. Aunt Malia had exactly 2 modes for surprises. Invited to dinner, and, we do not keep it. Kaya suspected Kip would fall between the 2 in the impossible category. They bundled the knot dog in a beach towel patterned with lemons. Kip cooed, patted a lemon, and absorbed the pattern like a trick of light so that for a second its fur wore little yellow suns, and hustled home by the mangrove path. It took precisely 7 seconds for Aunt Malia to notice. "Your towel is purring," she said, not looking up from the dough. "And it's wearing my lemons." Kaya held up Kip. He waved 2 paws, unfurled a third, and chirped, "Auntie." Aunt Malia's mouth performed a short, doomed riot between laughter and alarm. "Kaya, I found him. He fell. He speaks a little? He's not bitey? Look at his ears." And he repeats, "He's like a radio that learned manners." "Where did he fall from? The county council? A cruise ship?" "The sky," Kai said helpfully. Aunt Malia pinched the bridge of her nose, a gesture that had scolded generations of Hanu'u aunties and stunned Mullet at 20 paces. "Absolutely not." Kip's ears drooped. He made a tiny sound like 2 raindrops changing their mind. Kaya felt her body become a shield the way a wave becomes a hug with momentum. "We can't leave him in the woods. Someone will see, or he'll eat a gecko and learn bad habits. We are not a shelter for meteor puppies," Aunt Malia said. "We are barely a shelter for 2 people and a boy who eats after school like a vacuum with ideas." "First," Kai said, counting on his fingers, "I am standing right here. Second, we can hide him. Third, I bet he fetches coconuts." He didn't fetch coconuts. He fetched the entire fruit stand sign from Oliu's market and brought it to the porch like a trophy of love. "Good boy?" Kaya tried, while Aunt Malia put her face in her hands and said something to the gods about comets and children. That night, Kip learned television, excellent, the fridge, religion, and the concept of no theoretical. He could flatten himself into the shape of a rug to avoid detection, which worked until the rug thumped to the beat of the closing credits. He imitated the mocha pot. He imitated a rooster. The actual rooster, insulted, crowed at 2 a.m. Sometime after midnight, when the island's generators hummed their lullaby and the coconut crabs claimed the roads, Kaya lay awake on her woven mat and watched Kip staring at the ceiling as if the sky map was printed there. "You miss where you came from," she whispered. Kip's ears twitched. "Home," he said, the words struggling out of a mouth not designed for human sorrow. "I get that," Kaya said. "My home used to be 2 homes, before Mama went to the city to find a job and found a sickness instead. After she died, the aunties said grief is a tide. I made boats out of string. Stayed afloat." Kip rolled, pressed his forehead to hers, and made the soft static sound of a purr. The lemon pattern flickered back across his fur, bright in the dark like jokes that arrive right when you need them. "Okay," Kaya said, setting her jaw in that particular way that meant trouble would be politely escorted to a chair and convinced to stay for tea. "I'll keep you safe. You learn the house rules. No furniture theft, no eating tourists, and if anyone asks, you're a special needs dog with a permit in the mail." Kip nodded as if oaths were edible. "Kiosk Kip," he said, very small. In the quiet before dawn, a wind weather-vaned. Far above Hanu'u, unseen by ironwood and rooster, 3 sleek shapes slid out from a break in the sky like sharks leaving the shadow of a boat. Their hulls wore the same blue-white seam Kaya had seen earlier. They angled toward the island with patient hunger. Kip slept and dreamed in lemon. Kaya slept with one hand on his warm, improbable shoulder. The island listened, and the ocean kept its secrets for one more tide. Hiding Kip became a full-time internship. He was loud about quiet and quiet about mischief. He could not decide how many limbs to have at once. On Mondays he had 4 and looked like the world's most counterfeit dog. On Tuesdays he had 6 and climbed walls cheerfully, which Aunt Malia categorized under, "absolutely not in this house." Kai took the morning watch, teaching, sit, stay, and do not microwave the remote. Kea took afternoons, laundry basket naps, stealth lessons, and alphabet magnets. Kip preferred the letters that made good noises. His favorites were O and R, which he wore on his chest until they fell off and went missing, discovered later inside the rice bin. Word travels in island towns faster than the buses. Before the week's end, Uncle Toa from the Canoe Club had accidentally stopped by 3 times with excuses ranging from, "Your mango tree is bragging," to, "The trade winds asked after you." He squinted at Kip's rug shape and called it fashion forward. The mail carrier left a parcel of dog treats with no note. Oliu, of fruit stand fame, delivered lemons in a crate and whispered, "If the animal eats my signage again, I will teach it algebra as punishment." The real trouble arrived like it always does, neatly dressed and pretending to be helpful. The island's council scheduled a surprise meeting about unidentified aerial anomalies, with free pastries. Half the island showed up for the malasadas and stayed for the rumors. Councillor Canoe, whose shirts had never met a wrinkle and whose smile had never met an honest thought, clicked his PowerPoint remote like it owed him money. "We have reports," he said, "of a meteor or military drone. The university wants to set up monitoring buoys. The company Asterion," Aunt Malia said under her breath. "Nothing honest is named that. Has volunteered to fund a small research station," Canoe continued, "that will bring jobs, equipment, and tourists who love science." There were scorch marks near Ironwood Path. "If anyone found debris, please bring it to the council office. There may be a reward." Kea pressed her heel into the floor to stop her leg shaking. Kip was hidden under her seat, adopting the shape of a tote bag, which worked until he yawned and the tote bag yawned with him. At the back of the hall, 3 strangers stood too straight. They wore slate jackets unsuitable for humidity and had the bored expressions of people who think they're the only ones awake. One checked a device that looked exactly like a normal phone if normal phones emitted a faint blue note only metal could hear. Kai elbowed Kea. "Their haircuts could slice bread." "Government," Kea muttered. "Or worse, consultants." After the meeting, Aunt Malia collected free pastries with the ruthless efficiency of a woman who had raised a small hurricane. "We can't keep him," she whispered around a bag of guava malasadas. "We can," Kea said. "Or at least we can try. Someone else would make him a lab. We're a home." Aunt Malia's eyes softened, then remembered their duty. Homes burn when you don't check the stove. That night, the island held its weekly drum circle at the Canoe house. Hanu'u handled fear the way it handled weather, with music, then food, then fixing. Kea took Kip tucked in her hoodie like a baby possum. He bobbed to the beat, pupils tides wide. "Teach him to paddle," Uncle Toa said, deadpan, as the crew slid the canoe into the lagoon. "If he sinks, he's a rock. If he floats, he's a legend." On the water, moonlight kneaded the small waves. Kai sat stern, Kea mid-hull, Kip wedged between feet, vibrating at a frequency not recommended by maritime guidelines. "Easy," Kea murmured, scratching behind his shell ears. "This is where the island breathes." Kip's tail propeller thunked once against the canoe's rib. He lifted his face to the wind, caught a scent only comets know, and made a soft clicking noise. A shape slid under the canoe's belly, long, smooth, indifferent. The water barely lifted. Kea felt the weight of gaze from below, old and not impressed by boats. The island's reef sharks, the antis of the lagoon, were patrolling. One brushed the canoe. Kip chirped, extended a paw, and his paw split into a fan of tiny webbed fingers that flicked, politely, 3 times. Hello, hello, hello. The shark curved like a sentence that changes its mind. The water went calm as a held breath. From the bow, Uncle Toa said quietly, he talks to sharks. Neat, Kai whispered. We could charge for that. They returned to shore with the slow step of people who have seen something they won't say out loud until the right moment. The right moment became the next morning when the strangers with bread-slicing haircuts knocked on Aunt Malia's door. Good morning, said the lead one, a woman whose voice had been ironed. We're with Coastal Safety and Loud Shirt Compliance? Aunt Malia asked, expression bland as rice. And Research Coordination, the woman finished, unfazed. We're surveying for dangerous debris from last week's meteor. Have you or your niece seen anything unusual? The house replied with an exaggerated yawn. Kip had learned sound effects from television. No, Aunt Malia said. Kea, behind her, tried to look like a person who did not own a hex-toothed alien. The woman's attention slid to the lemons on the counter, to the missing chunk in Oliu's sign leaning against the porch rail, to the tote bag with suspicious ear-like corners. Her mouth performed arithmetic. We'll be in town, she said. If you think of anything, there's a reward. She passed a card. It said Dr. Sable Pierce, Asterian Field Ecology and nothing about governments. The small print tasted like legal rain. When they left, Kip popped out of the tote and sat on the table like a cake with opinions. Bad hair, he announced solemnly. Aunt Malia stared at him. We keep him, she said, shocking herself as much as anyone. But we do it my way. We set rules, we check the stove, and we keep the canoe ready. If trouble comes, Hanu'u leaves no one behind. Kea ran around the table and hugged her, making noises not previously recorded by science. Kip jumped to join the hug from a standing start, which knocked a bowl of limes onto the floor and summoned the rooster, who entered the house like an undertaker retainer and stole a lime. Kai, Kea said, already dialing, bring rope, the big cooler, and your I'm invisible t-shirt. They set up a hideout in the old net shed behind the canoe house, woven walls, sand floor, salt dreams. Kea strung prayer flags. Kai arranged a radio that could find the fisherman channel and, possibly, aliens. Aunt Malia stocked water and biscuits and a stern talk about not being heroes. Heroes were for the brochures. Kip learned to carry messages without eating them. He fetched slippers by smell and pride. He slept with his lemon spots glowing faintly, like someone had left happiness in the fridge and forgotten to close the door. 3 nights later, a storm shouldered the island. The 3 sleek shapes that had slid out of the sky earlier returned, lower now, hunting. Boats nosed toward harbor. The reef sharks patrolled urgently, slapping their tails with the sound of sentences getting louder. The lagoon learned a new light, blue-white, the color of a seam. Kea woke to her window full of weather. Kip stood on her chest, vibrating like an alarm. Kia, he said. Run. They ran. Aunt Malia bundled the emergency pack like a woman packing history. Kai already waited at the path, hair wild, eyes wider. Above the trees, a drone with patient teeth hovered, scanning. They reached the net shed just as the first sleek shape, no longer pretending to be anything Earth would allow, slid over the lagoon, silent and hungry. It released 3 silver discs that hit the water without splash and began to hum. Kip went very still, the way prey goes still when it becomes a lesson. Then he did something he hadn't done before. He unfurled, not taller, not bigger, just more real, as if someone had turned up the resolution on his existence. His eyes narrowed. The lemon marks faded into a deep, serious blue. "Kip," Kaya whispered. "Home hunters," he said, and in his mouth the words sounded older than Asterian or council meetings or men with haircuts. "They want me back. They take and break. No family." Kaya put her hand on his head. "They will have to go through all of Hanu'u," she said, with the unreasonable composure of someone who has decided the ending and left the middle to fate. Aunt Malia blew out the lantern and handed everyone string. "Why string?" Kai whispered. "Because courage hates rhetorical questions." "Because I raised a girl who can mend the sky," Aunt Malia said. "Let's see if she can tangle thieves." They set the first lines. The storm watched, impressed despite itself. The silver discs in the lagoon were not discs at all. They were nets coiled into patience. They unfolded, unfurling spider silk so fine the moon stuttered on it. The rain made applause. The ironwoods kept their old promises: stand, whisper, shelter. Kaya and Kai worked by touch, Aunt Malia by memory. They strung lines between the shed and the trees, between the canoes and the pilings, string and fishing line and strong twine from packages sent by cousins. They wove what Kaya knew, mending patterns that held without hurting. Kip crouched at the door, staring out at the water with a stare that had learned storms. He clicked once, twice. The reef sharks answered by slapping their tails in code. Somewhere in the radio static, Uncle Toa's voice emerged, calm as a chair. Wind swinging south. "If you're stupid enough to run, run with it." Dr. Sable Pierce's drone swept across the beach, blue note rising. "He's near salt," she muttered into her headset, tromping along the boardwalk, soaked but uncomplaining. Behind her, the two men from the meeting carried cases that snapped when opened. They did not look at the ocean as a person, they looked at it as a map. A spear of light reached from one of the sleek craft and touched the lagoon. The water woke, boiling without heat. The nets shone like regrets. "They're charging it," Kip said, voice flat. "Stasis field. If it covers the lagoon, nothing moves, not fish, not boats. Good for collecting, bad for outrunning." Aunt Malia's mouth went thin. "Then we don't use the lagoon." The old canoe ramp at the back of the shed led to the mangrove creek, a slow, narrow artery that wound inland to the taro fields and then back to the sea through a gap in the rocks only the old men remembered. At low tide it was a mud riddle. At high tide and in a south wind, a tunnel. Kaya and Kai slid the lightest canoe onto their shoulders. Kip climbed in like a promise with too many legs. Aunt Malia shoved from behind, knees and hands in history. The canoe kissed the creek, then slithered into the darker water like a fish remembering its first swim. The mangroves closed around them, making a green hull with roots for pillars and crabs for choir. The rain softened here, turning into mist that liked hair and secrets. The creek's skin was black glass. Every paddle stroke wrote a sentence that vanished. Left at the stump, Aunt Malia whispered, and Kaya steered as if the creek had taught her decades ago. Behind them, the stasis net unfurled across the lagoon with the smug certainty of a new bureaucrat. Boats stopped. Water went very still. Even rain hung mid-air like beads on invisible string. The reef sharks hit the boundary and bounced, furious. Uncle Toa's curses, bold and inventive, sizzled and then paused, suspended half-formed. "Sorry, Uncle," Kai whispered. "Hold that swear." The creek made a turn, a low branch scraping the canoe like a cat being helpful. Ahead, the rock gap glimmered faintly. If the tide had been half a foot lower, the canoe would have wedged. If the wind had been east, the swell at the gap would have slapped them back. Instead, South wind, good tide. Luck borrowed from an ancestor who wanted a story. They burst through the gap into open sea not yet pinned by the net. Rain stitched diagonally. The island looked new and older from this angle, a shoulder shrugging off weather. Out here, the sleek craft lurked like stingrays drawn crude, too many edges for the water to forgive. They had not expected the mangrove route. Their lights were pointed at the lagoon, at the obvious doorway. Kip stood in the bow and raised all 6 limbs. The blue marks along his sides lit in lines, like someone had built a constellation inside a puppy. He vibrated once and then not at all. The ocean around the canoe whispered, and then answered louder. A swell lifted, gentled, placed the canoe on its shoulder, and carried it diagonally across the grain of the chop. A voice cracked through the rain. Dr. Sable on a loudspeaker, like a substitute teacher who refuses to be ignored. "We can keep him safe," she shouted. "He's dangerous here. He will be studied, cared for, understood. You cannot protect him from what's coming." Aunt Malia stood, which in a canoe is a kind of declaration of war. "We write our own coming," she shouted back. "Find someone else to save for a brochure." Kea felt the canoe shiver underfoot, not from fear but from decision. She steered for the shoulder of a long, slow swell, and the canoe obliged, lifting into the safer part of the sea like a dancer finding the beat. The nearest sleek craft pivoted. A long arm slid from its belly and spat a net that unfolded in wind, a flying jellyfish. Down, Kai yelped, and all 4 of them, including Kip, flattened into the canoe's ribs as the net whooshed over and missed by kindness. "Again," Kea said, and paddled with the fury of someone whose childhood has been asked for collateral. They surfed the back of the next swell, letting speed be a kind of consent. The rain turned friendly. The reef line up ahead boiled where deep met shallow. If Kea cut too late, the canoe would tea kettle in the shorebreak. If she cut too early, they'd hit coral with the sound of a promise being charged interest. Kip looked back at the sleek craft. He opened his mouth and sang. It was not human singing. It was not a whale's song. It was the sound of re-entry, softened for ears with feelings. The friction of atmosphere and intention. The relief of water after heat. The long, deep yes of gravity letting you live. The ocean recognized it. The reef lifted to listen. The swell reshaped around the canoe. A small jaw closing around a small fish but doing it kindly. They shot the pass. The sleek craft tried to follow and met the reef with all the politeness of a fax machine crashing a wedding. It screeched. Dr. Sable swore into the radio in a dialect that did not come from islands. The other craft lifted, banking wide. Kea and company paddled into a small cove carved in the rock like a bite mark left by time. The cove's water was messy with foam and relief. They beached the canoe on black pebbles speckled with white shell. Kip jumped out, shook, and threw stars. "Hideout number 2, Kai panted. "Do we have a hideout number 3? And a 4? I'd like a long list." "We have caves," Aunt Malia said, pointing to a low mouth in the cliff. "And we have friends. All of them are wet." "Good." Inside the cave, fish hooks older than any living fisherman hung in neat lines, left for storms and time. The walls remembered fires. The roof had the faint glitter of salt that meant, "This place cries and then dries, a safe cycle." Kip curled into a coil of old rope and pressed his ear, if it was an ear, against the rock. "They don't stop," he murmured. "They always follow. They pull and pull until you learn to break. They say they are saving you from yourself. They break homes. They call it keeping." Kea crouched. "Who? The people from the sky? Or Asterion?" Kip's gaze flicked toward the cave mouth, toward the rain, toward the part of the ocean that had become a door. Both, he said simply. Different names, same net. Aunt Malia rubbed her hands together to warm them, the way she did when thinking. If someone breaks a net, she said, we don't go yell at the water for being wet. We mend the net, or we cut it if it's wrong. Kaya felt the spool of herself. She could see, suddenly, the whole knot pattern of what needed doing. We can't outrun them forever, she said. We make them stop wanting him. Kai blinked. How? Tell a better story, Kaya said, soft but sure. Not just here. Everywhere. Show them keeping Kip breaks something you can't put back. People in suits don't hear stories, Kai said. They hear money. They hear shame, Aunt Malia said. If you can make them. Dr. Sable's voice floated weakly through the rain. We will wait you out. The net holds the lagoon. The storm will pass. The company does not tire. Kaya looked at the cave roof glittering with old salt and new. At the black pebbles settled into peace. At the line where ancestors had hung hooks and gone home to warm hands. Then we don't wait, she said. We go to them. How? Kai waved a hand at the ocean like a magician, admitting that this trick was big. We do not own an anti-net. We own rope and a puppy with starfish vibes. Kip lifted his head. I can open the seam, he said slowly. My pod had enough charge to fall. Their machines have enough to chase. I can borrow. The ocean will complain but forgive me. I can open it long enough for a message. A message to who? Aunt Malia asked. To them, Kip said, eyes going far. To the place I fell from. To the ones who started hunting. To the ones who think they are rescuing. I can show them what a home is. Kaya's heart did a slow somersault. You'll show them Hanu'u. Hanu'u, Kip repeated carefully, and made it sound like a vow. They waited for the squall to find a new mood, then slid the canoe back into the water. The swell had settled into something friendly. The sleek craft cruised the horizon pretending to be birds that had eaten the wrong story. Dr. Sable's drone dangled over the lagoon pathetically, net humming, not understanding that the island had already found an answer sideways. They paddled to the pass and stopped. Kip stood with his paws on the bow, all six this time, eyes narrowing to comets. He inhaled the way the ocean does when it wants to show off. The air around the canoe chilled, then warmed, then decided to be both. Above them, the rain paused out of curiosity. Kip sang again. The seam answered. It wasn't a tear. It was a stitch opening. Blue-white light wrote itself across the low clouds. The world thinned with a soft hum Kaya felt in her teeth. Beyond the seam, a space that wasn't space, rippling like heat, alive like whaleskin. 1,000 small lights appeared in it like fish schooling. Kip of Kaya, a voice said, not in their ears, but in the parts of their hearts that believed in storms. You were lost. We are sorry. We sent nets. The nets found you. Your nets are wrong, Kip said, very small but very precise. You take and break. You say, safe, and you mean, quiet. You say, home, and you mean, box. Come look. He gestured with two paws. The seam widened, uncertain. Through it stepped, floated, something like Kip and nothing like him. Older, larger, a shape built to fit storms. Its eyes were a darker sea. It carried a device that glowed with the same wrong kindness as the lagoon net. And then it looked at Hanu'u and its color changed. Not to lemon, to sorrow. It watched the canoe, the cave, the taro field roofline visible beyond the ironwoods. Aunt Malia's hair soaked and stubborn. Kai's breath white in rain. Kaya's hands on the paddle like an oath. This is home, Kip said. They did not take. They wrapped me in lemons. They showed me sharks who say hello. They mended nets that should not catch. They are family. That is a word you don't have. Family is a dangerous word. It opens and cannot be closed without blood. The being in the seam shivered. We had families, it said, a long time ago in a voice that had trapped its own echo. We organized them out. It was efficient. Your efficiency is a weapon, Aunt Malia said, because someone had to. Put it down. From the horizon, the sleek craft pivoted, saw the seam, and brightened. Dr. Sable's drone jerked, confused. The seam being looked at the sleek craft with a kind of tired recognition. You made replicas, it said to itself, annoyed and impressed. Of our wrong ideas. Kip stepped forward, toward the seam. Kaya's hands went slick on the paddle. No, she said instinctively. They don't get you back to fix their paperwork. Kip looked at her and then at the being and then at Hanu'u all at once, which is the kind of looking adults forget how to do. I am not going with nets anymore, he said. I am taking this place into you. The being considered. You ask for us to be changed by you. It glanced at the sleek craft, saw the net strangling the lagoon, and made a decision older than laws. Yes. It spread its limbs. Light folded. The seam widened, then inverted, then became a window in the rain. Through it, 1,000 beings saw Hanu'u. The canoe house. The aunties cooking. The stubborn roosters. The reef sharks swearing. The fruit stand sign with a bite out of it. The way Kaya's hand rested on Kip's head and made him brave enough to sing. The sleek craft dimmed. Their nets sagged, lost the story that powered them. Dr. Sable's drone fell into the lagoon with a self-pitying splash. On the radio, Uncle Toa's paused swear completed itself in triumph. Kip let the seam close gently, like closing a sleeping baby's door. Now what? Kai said, voice high with the sudden possibility that everything might be okay. We clean up, Aunt Malia said. We make tea. We tell the council to take their reward and buy a clue. We send a letter to Asterion. Your money is not invited to fish here. Dr. Sable waded out of the lagoon, hair plastered to skull, expression not exactly defeated. She looked at the canoe. She looked at Kip. She took off her headset and dropped it in the water. I like being paid, she said conversationally, but I like sleeping better. Someone will come worse than me. Make it so even they feel silly. How? Kaya asked. Make it public, Dr. Sable said. Invite the world to a family dinner. She nodded once, as if congratulating herself on treason, and trudged toward the boardwalk. Kip sagged like a tent in the sudden lack of wind. Kaya hauled him into the canoe and he put his face in her shoulder, trembling. You were very brave, she whispered. I was brave next to you. Together brave, Kip murmured into the lemon smell of her shirt. Together brave, Kaya agreed, and the ocean made an approving noise. They called it the Festival of Knots because that sounded both like Hanu'u and like something a grant application would not understand. The island posted invitations on every tree, every pole, every social feed. Come learn to mend nets. Bring stories. Bring cameras. Bring the kind of eyes that make companies nervous. Boats from the other islands arrived with coolers and cousins. Students from the university came with notebooks and curiosity. Tourists lined the seawall and forgot to pretend they were only here for the beach. Even the counselors showed up because nobody wanted to be the only person not in the photographs. On the first day, the aunties taught Lark's Head, Clove Hitch, Double Fisherman's. On the second, the uncles taught canoe lashings and the art of yelling helpfully at surf. On the third, the kids taught rope tricks that would break physicists' hearts. Kip learned them all and, when asked, served as an enthusiastic demonstration rope, flattening into a line and letting Aunt Malia tie a bullet in his middle. He held the shape and then popped back with a chirp that translated roughly to, "Ta-da." Dr. Sable attended in a normal shirt with an embarrassed smile. "I got a new job," she told Aunt Malia. "It pays less and requires more apologies. I like it." "Good," Aunt Malia said. "If you're going to keep showing up, bring pudding." The sleek craft never returned. The seam beings did, quietly, in the rain sometimes, just at the edge of sky, their lights like a school of fish pretending to be stars. They watched Hanu'u and learned why the island had hands. The council voted, narrowly, to tell Asterion no. "We prefer expansions that taste of mango and consent," the resolution read, written by a teenager and edited by an auntie who respected commas. Kea and Kai started an after-school program called Stitch Crew. They taught knotting and canoe repair and media literacy. How to recognize a net disguised as a story. Uncle Toa swore less, or at least more creatively. Oliu replaced his fruit stand sign with one that read "Kip ate this." We forgive him and crossed his arms to hide his smile when people took pictures. Kip became part of the island in the way that goats and mail carriers and weather are part of an island. Sometimes inconvenient, always accounted for in plans. He wore a harness when tourists were watching and smiled for selfies with the dignified patience of a small celebrity. He learned to fetch, not signs, not coconuts, but slippers. He returned letters without chewing them. He swam with the reef sharks in the afternoons and brought back gossip. Which whale had passed, which current had told a joke, which turtle had a crush. On the last night of the festival, Kea strung the final line of lights from the canoe house to the ironwoods. The whole island gathered on mats and benches under the glow. Aunt Malia ladled stew into paper bowls and scolded people for standing and not eating. Drums began, steady and complicated. The reef shimmered with night fish. The seam in the sky winked once like a grandparent who lives far away. Kea stood and cleared her throat, rope in her hands. "We called this the Festival of Knots," she said, "because knots are how you keep things, canoes, nets, promises, together. But knots are also how you let go. You untie. You decide where a story ends and where it continues." She lifted Kip, who tolerated being lifted like a prince that prefers the floor. "This is Kip. He fell. We caught him. He taught us a song for the ocean and a new way to say family." Kip reached for the microphone and said into it, very seriously, "Together brave." The island cheered like surf on rock. After speeches and a dance where Aunt Malia surprised everyone by being incredible, the children paraded down the beach with lanterns made of paper and wishful thinking. Kea and Kai walked last, Kip between them, lemon spots glowing softly, tail propeller behaving itself for once. "Do you miss where you came from?" Kea asked, not because she doubted his answer, but because good families ask the questions again in case answers change. Kip thought. "Yes," he said, "I miss the part that knows my first song. But I have a new song now. It is here." He tapped Kea's chest with a paw. Then he tapped his own, and then, without looking, tapped Aunt Malia, who was pretending to be annoyed at the fireworks. He reached up, tapped the sky. "All of it," he said, satisfied. "Broader family," Kai said, eyes reflecting lantern light. "Complicated family. The best kind." They walked to the ironwoods where the crater had been. Grass had already learned the shape of it and moved on. The sphere from Kip's fallen pod had been planted in the corner as a planter filled with basil and jokes. Someone, Kai, had painted on it in neat letters, Sometimes the sky falls so we can pick it up. At the edge of the water, Uncle Toa lit the last firework. It climbed laboriously, as if it had forgotten its purpose, then remembered and became a gold umbrella that made the lagoon's skin look like stars had decided to visit. Kip watched, ears forward, not flinching. "Boom," he said appreciatively. Then he leaned against Kaya's leg and sighed, a sound that contained sleep and victory and a long-held breath released. The wind shifted, carrying rain from the mountains. People began to gather mats and children in bowls. The reef shark's tail slapped goodnight. The island rotated gently, as islands do, pretending not to while absolutely doing so. Kaya tied off the last string of lights, made sure the knots would hold until morning, and turned to the sea. "Tomorrow," she told it. "No nets. Only ropes. Only hands." The sea approved. Kip sneezed a tiny spark that smelled like lemons and thunder. Aunt Malia put a hand on both their heads and murmured, "Okay." Home. The night closed around them, soft as a well-mended net.